place to call home, your own home, where you grow old and you become a man. In your home, your own home, where you grow old, your woman in your
It is just Ginger coming through with Home. That is how we kick off the show this afternoon. A little bit of that local flavor. I haven't heard much from them in a minute, but then maybe it's because I haven't been really paying attention. Who knows? But a wonderful way to start off a little bit of a nostalgic note as well, bringing us to 10 past 1 o'clock on the Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga. We've got a jam-packed show today. We are talking treatment and adherence. So it is the first World Adherence Day. It's launching on the 27th of March, which is just 2 days away. And we'll get to find out exactly what this day speaks to under the theme #Don't Miss a Moment. Also coming up today, stages, pages, screens and more in South Africa is taking center stage at the Shanghai Fashion Week 2025. And we've seen some of our favorite designers representing us there. And we'll catch up with Jessica Jane and Wandile from Molibatsi and find out how that experience has been for them. On the other side of 2 o'clock, it is, of course, Tuesday today. So we have health and wellness. And we're looking at World Doula Week, right? The director of DOSA, Doulas of South Africa, is going to be joining us. And we'll be finding out more about this profession. And, of course, if you have any questions at all that pertains to that, gentlemen, you're probably wondering, what is a doula? But you'll find out after 2 o'clock. Our lines are open. 0614104107 is our WhatsApp line. You can send through your WhatsApp voice notes if you'd wish to do so. Or 086-000-2032 is the number that you can call us on. Alternatively, you can also find us on social media. We are on X, the hashtag the Full Circle, and of course our handle at SAFM. Let's take a quick pause and then we'll be right back.
This Human Rights Month, SAFM is deepening a culture of social justice and human rights. It's a time to reflect, engage, and take action for a more just society. From thought-provoking discussions to powerful stories, SAFM is leading the conversations that move us. Because your voice matters, your rights matter, and together we shape a better future. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. Ashraf Gada on SAFM.
So they don't want to swap a card for whatever reason. They can get their money. Is that just for this month or even next month as well?
It's going to, even next month, they would be able to go to the post office, but it's an inconvenience.
Of course it is.
You must understand that it's an inconvenience. But secondly, we have a suspicion, a reasonable suspicion, that certain people don't want to come and swap their card because of fraudulent activities, and they know that when they come to do their biometrics, they'll be nabbed. But we don't want...
Are you saying that they don't want it because they themselves are guilty of fraudulent activities? Is that what you're referring to?
We know that there are certain people that might not want to come forward to change the cards because there might be some fraudulent activities which are taking place.
Paseka Letsatsi, the SASA head of communications.
You're listening to the National Pulse. Missed it? Find the podcast at safm.co.za.
We are in conversation now with Verosha Dionaran of Sevia, and Diona is the head of medical affairs manager at Sevia, and we're looking at World Adherence Day, which is launching come the 27th of March, and it's a call to action for healthcare professionals and patients to adhere to treatment plans. How are you doing this afternoon, Verosha?
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it. Let's get into it. First of its kind, World Adherence Day, launching in 2 days' time, 27th of March. The purpose and the intention behind observing such a day, and what was the motivation for the healthcare sector?
Well, I suppose what is adherence, as defined by the WHO, it refers to how the person aligns the advice or action given to them by the healthcare provider. So what is the extent to which a behavior such as taking a medication, following a diet, or executing a lifestyle change corresponds with the recommendation from your doctor.
Yeah.
So we know that globally there is an issue of non-adherence to lifestyle modifications, to medications. So the aim essentially was to raise local as well as global awareness on adherence, and it's also to mobilize action that will improve the adherence to medical treatments and lifestyle changes. So it being a global initiative, it is led by the World Heart Federation and then supported by prominent societies such as your European Society of Cardiology, your Independent or your International Diabetes Federation, as well as by Servier Laboratories.
This year, the inaugural theme is hashtag Don't Miss a Moment. Let's talk to that theme, because I think it speaks in just to what you've just outlined, re-adherence or rather non-adherence.
Correct. So, Don't Miss a Moment goes back to one of the actual causes of non-adherence, being that our patients lack awareness. They lack the education, the condition. The patient who is empowered will likely be adherent. So we are encouraging doctors to spend 1 more minute with their patients to give them additional moments in their life back with their families. We know that adherence to medication will improve their health outcomes. A lot of the times give them a longevity or add more years to their lives. So we're mobilizing doctors and just other healthcare workers as well, your nurses, allied health, to spend time with patients, them and empowering them with the adequate knowledge so that they are more empowered.
Varosha?
Hi. Sorry,
Oh, there you go. Yes. We had a slight break there for a second. You may continue, yes.
Oh, sorry, I don't know where you dropped me. But I was just saying that the Don't Miss a Moment campaign is encouraging healthcare workers, doctors, allied healthcare to spend more time in giving patients information and empowering them about their own condition so that they take better charge of their own lives. So the patients in return will have longevity on their own lives.
Let's also talk about, and it's important, right, to educate and empower patients. And perhaps even if we expand to why there's such a lack of treatment adherence, why is it such a critical issue, especially if we're talking chronic conditions, right? We find a lot of times in the context of South Africa, the messaging from medical healthcare workers will be that folks don't adhere to their chronic meds. What's missing by way of ensuring that patients are committed to the success of their own treatment?
I think, there's multiple reasons, and there's not just one reason why patients struggle to follow their treatment plans or the given regimen. We also have to be cognizant of our socioeconomic status, in that there are social inequities apparent, right? We have issues with access to health care, there's financial constraints or financial barriers. Simpler and hitting closer to home would be a complexity of a regimen. Patients who are multimorbid, meaning that they have more than one chronic condition, face the task of taking a lot of medication. So if we can simplify those regimens by giving patients, instead of monotherapy or single pill just single pills, but combine it into single pill combinations, or SPCs as we refer that to, will simplify the regimens. It will make skipping a dose that much more difficult. If we just make it more easier for patients. There's also the cultural barriers that we have to address with patients. So it's not just, it's a multiple-fold problem that we are facing, and it really can't just be looked into as from one scope or one lens.
Just looking at the time, it's 20 past 1 o'clock. Let's hit a quick pause here, and then we'll come back on the other side and continue our conversation. And perhaps we'll also explore, by context of South Africa, what are the stats telling us around the problem of non-adherence, as well as the biggest consequences that are faced by patients who don't follow the prescribed treatment. It is The Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga, on SAFM.
SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za.
Durban is excited to welcome visitors this Easter season. Join the family-friendly fun with unforgettable day tours along the Golden Mile, indoor and outdoor adventures, and delicious culinary delights. Don't miss the grand opening of West Town Square on the 27th of March, Durban's newest lifestyle destination in Shongweni. This multi-million rand project is set to transform the city's western corridor. As Africa's event capital, Durban will host major events this season, including the joyous celebration Easter Megafest and the Pre-Easter Gospel Festival. Discover the excitement in Africa's playground. And for more details and Easter packages, you can visit www.visitdurban.travel. Hashtag Durban Easter 2025. Hashtag Discover Durban. Hashtag Visit Durban.
You are listening to The Full Circle.
I mean, it's always a good time to visit my home city, hey? Always a good time. I think they forgot one hashtag there. Hashtag I love Durban. As we continue with the conversation, we in conversation with Varosha Dionaran, and we're talking around World Adherence Day, which is launching on the 27th of March, and it's a call to action for healthcare professionals and patients to adhere to treatment plans, which happens to be one of the most challenging issues in global health. And how serious is this problem for us here in South Africa, Varosha? Because we have this conversation, ironically enough, on the back of the Minister of Health launching the 2025 TB campaign with quite an ambitious target there, if I recall, trying to hit 5 million diagnoses and treatments by the time this campaign has rolled out. It also speaks to the fact that here we have an example of a preventable disease that often goes unchecked, undiagnosed, and when it is, goes untreated because folks don't follow through with their treatment plan.
Mm-hmm. So non-adherence to medication in South Africa is a significant public health challenge. In South Africa, the prevalence of non-communicable diseases, and when I say non-communicable diseases, I'm speaking about conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia. These conditions have been rising significantly. If we look at the period between about 1997 and 2018, deaths due to these major non-communicable diseases increased by about 60%. So it's been on the rise. We do have data from about a few years back that compared adherence to medication in cardiovascular patients versus adherence to medication with HIV-positive patients. The data was astounding because the adherence to medication in the cardiovascular patient was sitting at around 42%. And if you compare that to HIV medication, which was at 90%. Now, a lot can be said from that data alone that shows that close to about 60% of patients are non-adherent to cardiovascular medication. Having a really good adherence rate to HIV medication shows the power of pull of government. When resources are put into something and there is a big focus, we know that successes can be achieved. So we know that there's a huge issue. There is a dire issue of non-adherence to medication of your non-communicable diseases, and a lot more needs to be done from both private as well as public sector.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit as well about, and you spoke earlier, right, in as far as what patients struggle with, what they've articulated. I can understand a scenario where you are taking a combination of medicines. I mean, even when you have the common flu, once you up to 3 tablets, antibiotics that you must finish, some cough syrup, it becomes difficult to be committed to that regime for that week or that 10 days. And then if you have to be committed to a regime for essentially your lifetime or a prolonged period, I can almost see where the problem would be. But outside of that, are there other reasonings that patients have communicated, sort of their lack of commitment to follow through with adherence, or why they're non-adherent?
So, I mentioned the study just now that shows the differences in cardiovascular management versus HIV management. And one of the outcomes of that study was why cardiovascular management is so bad when it came to adherence. Some of the factors pointed out were higher age. So the older patients battle to take and adhere to their medication plan. And then also a big factor was level of awareness and understanding your disease. If you take something like hypertension, for an example, it is often referred to as a silent killer because it doesn't present noticeable symptoms. Many individuals with high blood pressure at times may feel perfectly healthy. And this can lead to a lack of awareness about their condition. Patients stop taking their medication, they revert back to unhealthy habits. So what happens over time? As a result of non-adherence, there's a worsening, there's an exacerbation of this condition. So I think the underlying basis here is that there needs to be a focus on educating our society as well. We need to be, as healthcare practitioners, we need to be cognizant that if this is an older patient, what barriers do they face? Are there any mental health issues that needs to be addressed as well? Patients who, and this has been shown as well, patients with mental health conditions such as depression, schizophrenia, default quite a bit on their medication, and not for lack of trying, but a lack of understanding, and genuinely because they forget to take the medication. So again, it's something that's multifold, and we also the male patient has also been shown to default much more than your female patients.
Yeah.
That alone is another topic that we could dissect as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think every patient that's been diagnosed with some kind of disease or illness fully understands the consequences of non-adherence to their medication. And a lot of times people just weigh, I guess, the risks and the recklessness of that decision not to adhere. Just as we part ways, what pertinent question or questions should patients be asking their healthcare providers about their treatment that maybe you've identified as, well, this is where the miscommunication is happening?
So I think it's really important for patients to understand their condition. Ask the doctors, what is my diagnosis? What does this mean for me? What will happen if my condition progresses without treatment? They need to be fully aware of what will happen with treatment and without treatment. Also very pertinent is that patients need to be aware of the risk and side effects. Because if a patient takes a medication and develops a side effect, and not told or counseled about their side effect, they are likely to default, to just stop treatment, to think that the medication is making things worse. If patients are adequately counseled when they are given their script and advised about what they should expect, to contact the HCP or the healthcare doctor, should anything develop, hospitalizations, it allows both the doctor and the patient to better manage these side effects and the expectations.
Yeah.
The understanding on the side of the patient is really crucial, even if they feel better not to default in treatment and so forth.
Yeah.
the basis of that understanding for the patient to get information from the doctor.
Varosha, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it. That was Varosha Dionaran of Servia, and she is the head of medical affairs at Servia. It's exactly 1:30. It's time for us to get into the headline news.
With the headlines at 1:30, I'm Dino Madaung. Good afternoon. SSA says the total number of formal sector jobs has increased by 12,000 in the last quarter of 2024. The increase brings the number of formally employed to 10.6 million. In other news, government says it has approved about 23,000 business permits for spaza shops and other food handling businesses to operate. And the Israeli military has extended its evacuation orders in northern Gaza to include the Jabalia area. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
This Human Rights Month, SAFM is deepening a culture of social justice and human rights. It's a time to reflect, engage, and take action for a more just society. From thought-provoking discussions to powerful stories, SAFM is leading the conversations that move us. Because your voice matters, your rights matter, and together we shape a better future. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. These are the weekend shows on SAFM. Music of Africa with Shayla Ndikumana. The Jet Set Breakfast with Michelle Constant. Seasons with Khomotso KG Mweketsi. The soundtrack of your life with Ernest Pillay. Weekend Soundowner Classics with Kutlwano Masote. Spotlight with Zai Khan. The Weekend with John Kherika. Rhythm of Africa with Shayla Ndikumana. This is SAFM. Tulasizwe Simelane on SAFM.
How disruptive did you find yesterday's blockage of roads by striking EMPD officers using official vehicles to stage that protest?
It's lawlessness that we must not tolerate. And I've sent a very strong message to all law enforcement agencies, the SAPS, including the Ekurhuleni leadership. This must not be tolerated. We can't be in a position to run government if you have this kind of lawlessness, where law enforcement agencies can behave the way they're behaving. You can't just close a highway, especially going to airport. It disrupts just everyone, even if it does not go into the airport. But we don't have to tolerate this kind of lawlessness. If we can't stop this kind of law enforcement of lawlessness, which one are we going to stop? Do we deserve to be called law enforcement agencies or police if people can do as they wish in our own country, in our own province?
That's Premier Panyaza Lesufi, the Premier of Gauteng.
This is Tulasizwe Simelane on The Morning Brief. Missed it? Find the podcast at safm.co.za.
Hi, I'm Zycard. Catch me every Saturday from 7 to 9 p.m. on Spotlight as we bring you blow-by-blow sporting action, news. That's Spotlight every Saturday. You don't want to miss it.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 104.4 FM in Durban.
Alrighty, so as we try and get our guests on the line, and we've got a host of really robust conversations coming through. It just so happens that a lot of our guests are actually traveling at the moment and trying to find those necessary connections when folks are out of the country becomes a little bit problematic. But we definitely are going to be in conversation very soon around, of course, health and wellness. We're going to be talking World Doula Week later on in the show, and you want to be a part of that conversation in case you're not clued in as to what being a doula is all about. I know a lot of women are probably versed on this, and maybe you're pregnant at the moment or planning, family planning, and thinking around what would be your birthing options, right? So we're going to have that conversation with the Director of Doulas of South Africa on the other side of 2 o'clock. And if you want to send through your questions already around that, you're more than welcome to do so. Our WhatsApp lines are open. A lot of pregnant women choose the option of incorporating doulas into the maternity or pregnancy plan. And sometimes folks might have heard about it but are feeling a bit skeptical, not too clear what it is and how it complements Western medicine. And this is exactly why we are going to have that conversation. So you want to be on time for that. 0614104107 is our WhatsApp line. If you want to send through any voice notes, comments, questions around it, you're more than welcome to do so. Let's take a quick pause and then we'll come back on the other side.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation.
Alrighty, so we finally made our way through to Shanghai. Lots of activities happening there at the moment. We know that South Africa is cementing its place as a rising force in the global creative economy. And there's a dynamic group of the country's top fashion designers that is currently taking to the center stage at the highly anticipated 2025 Shanghai Fashion Week, which is running from today until the 29th of March in China's fashion capital of Shanghai. And amongst them are the likes of David Tlali, amongst them are the likes of Mzukisi Mbane of Imprint, as well as Palisa Mokubong of Mansu, Richard Mnisi, Jessica Jane of Molibatsi. And so we thought we'd catch up with Mzukisi this afternoon of Imprint and find out how things are going. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Bridget. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How I wish one of you would have packed me in a suitcase and taken me to Shanghai.
It would have been definitely nice.
It would have been a trip. It would have been a trip indeed. I mean, before we even get to the preparation side of it, but paint us a picture of, you know, the environment and the atmosphere by which the South African designers find themselves in Shanghai right now.
It's very difficult to explain, but I love, more than anything, I think for me it starts with the concept of the trip. We've done a lot of international shows, a lot of international trade shows, but I think this one, from the concept of it, because it's development reimagined with Brand SA, they've taken it in a way that it changes the perception of what South Africa has to offer. Because as we know, China is it's kind of it's very easily accessible via the social media platform, but because it's closed off, they don't get to consume our content, they don't get to know who we are and what we're capable of. So this program allows us to do just that, and the reception has been amazing.
And weirdly enough, you know, we lost you there for a little bit because of network, we understand. But weirdly enough, right, as much as we are well versed on China, Chinese culture, they sort of consumerism. To your point, I think Chinese very much live an isolated world where they don't necessarily get the kind of global exposure that other countries do to other cultures, other fashion, other people. And what has that exchange been? I know you guys have only been there for a day or two, but what has that exchange of culture and knowledge been like so far?
There's been a lot of fascination, especially when you just get to explain the production processes, just seeing what our clothes look like. Because there's also that, because they have an idea of the fact that we are creatives. There's design industry that exists outside of them, but they're not really aware as to the quality of our work. I think that's one thing that has been mind blowing for them, because there's this perception of this idea that if you want to produce quality, or if you want to have something that's off the world level, it has to be produced in China. So for us to be here and to bring finished products that are made in South Africa, it has changed the perception. And like I said, they've been very excited. And also just the culture element of it, because my brand is all about prints.
Yes.
It's all about telling African stories. So the idea of what an African print is supposed to look like, as opposed to how I interpret African prints and I translate it into my futuristic design, it's also like a positive thing that they were not expecting.
I love the fact that it's, the designers that are part of this trade show trip are designers that represent a very dynamic but holistic picture of South African creativity, right? Yourselves as Imprint, David Tlali, Richard Mnisi, Palisa Mbong, Jessica Jane. It's quite the rich representation of who South Africans are. And what I also find of interest is you guys were also just a week ago at the forefront of a picket, the most fashionable picket, the most fashionable picket march that we've ever seen in the history of the country.
Yeah.
And where you brought really pertinent issues about your businesses to the public platform.
And those issues, Bridget, is stuff that we really need to talk about. But I feel like for me, if we don't have trade platforms like this, we can't really enforce and allow the South African fashion industry to be at a point where we don't have to go to the streets and convince people to buy local. They can understand that South African fashion is world class. South African fashion is consumed outside of South Africa, and it's actually appreciated.
Yeah. Mzugisi, I want us to just pause there for a second as we take a quick break. Hopefully our connection will hold, and we'll come back and we'll steal 5 more minutes of your time.
As the cost of living rises, from school fees to the price of cereal, you can take comfort in knowing that with Outsurance, you could save big on your car insurance. Savings that could make a real difference to your budget every month. Outsurance client Mikey knows all about it.
These guys are super fast, they're very helpful. My bank account is flexing.
Why wait? Switch and save today. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is all about giving you value for your money. Enjoy life-saving services like Help It Out, with 24/7 access to panic assistance, roadside assistance, and home assistance with just a tap on the app.
Feel good. That means that I'm being looked after.
Make today the day you switch. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. With Outsurance, you always get something out. A licensed insurer and FSP. Limits apply. T's and C's online.
The Cheetahs are very hungry for victory. However, Bafana say they are in the business of collecting 3 points. The West battles it out with the South. This is the FIFA World Cup 2026 African qualifier. Experience the delight of African football. Benin versus South Africa. On Tuesday, 25 March at 5:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, S3, and at 6 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Also, available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Get a true AI business partner from Vodacom Business when you get the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra on a Red Business 1.7 gig contract for 1,599 Rand per month over 24 months. Enhance your deal. Add 349 Rand extra per month over 24 months and get the Samsung Galaxy Watch Ultra. Available in-store and online. T's and C's apply. Further together. Vodacom Business.
Arts, culture, and robust conversations with Bridget Masinga.
We are catching up with Mzugisi Mbane of Imprint, founder and creative director of Imprint, and is currently showcasing at the Shanghai Fashion Week 2025 with some design colleagues there. And they are leading under the banner of Africa Reimagined showroom that's curated by the department Reimagined. And they are an award-winning African-led, women-led international development consultancy. Let's talk, Zugisi, about the business aspirations for creatives when such platforms are created. What are you hoping would be the output and the takeaway for you guys as South African and African designers at large?
I think more than anything for us is to open the trade relationships. We export a lot of things. We export a lot of things as a country. We import a lot of resources, but this opportunity allows us to be exposed to the Chinese market, which is a huge market. One person actually said today that if you conquer this market as a designer, you are set. So, for instance, if Imprint is stocked in Shanghai, it informs a lot of countries with a lot of provinces within China, a lot of other countries within the Asian market. So it sets you up for life.
Absolutely. No argument there. We've seen the buying power of Asian consumers indeed. And I think any sound business person wants to infiltrate that market.
Definitely.
So when are you showcasing? Are you done already? Because we've been following you guys on social media. We've been seeing the little teasers here and there of the creativity. But when does the full force of South Africa take to the stage?
Sure. Cool. So over the 3-4 days, it's going to be a buyer's or a trade show rather, which is very important. Outside of the runway show, meeting with buyers, meeting with different stores. That's where you get to gauge if your product has a space in the Shanghai market, Beijing, and Tokyo. That's where we interact with these buyers. And then on the 29th, that's when we are hitting the runway for them to actually see the clothing on the models and get to experience it from a different view.
Well, listen, we wish you guys the very best of luck. May you come back with many deals signed and enjoy the experience and the exposure that comes with it. Thank you so much for the time. And no doubt you are also quite the crowd pleaser there because for those of you who have not seen Mzugisi, not only is he colorful in appearance, but he also stands at over 2 meters high. So I can imagine that he's quite the star attraction.
Actually, right now, Bridget, because we went to see, we're touring just around. The amount of pictures that have been taken of me, it's like I'm the show.
I can only imagine. We appreciate the time. Well, we'll let you get back to your adoring audience. That was Mzugisi Mbane of Imprint South Africa. And of course, he's in Shanghai for that Shanghai Fashion Week. Rich Misi was there about a month ago, and I was laughing at him because he made the headline news all over China. And the headlines translated were, "Have you seen the giant from Africa?" So now there are 2 giants roaming around the streets of Shanghai representing South Africa. We're going to take a quick pause and then we're going to come back on the other side.
Whether it is a CCMA referral, problems with a mechanic, or unfair blacklisting, Clientele legal plans are affordable and you receive up to 670,000 rands worth of legal services per year. We cover civil, criminal, and labor-related matters. Our legal team will be your support 24 hours a day. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and a licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
So they don't want to swap a card for whatever reason. They can get their money. Is that just for this month or even next month as well?
It's going to, even next month, they would be able to go to the post office, but it's an inconvenience.
Of course it is.
You must understand that it's an inconvenience. But secondly, we have a suspicion, a reasonable suspicion, that certain people don't want to come and swap their card because of fraudulent activities, and they know that when they come to do their biometrics, they'll be nabbed. But we don't want.
Are you saying that they don't want it because they themselves are guilty of fraudulent activities? Is that what you're referring to?
We know that there are certain people that might not want to come forward to change the cards because there might be some fraudulent activities which are taking place.
Paseka Letsatsi, the SASSA head of communications.
You're listening to the National Pulse. Missed it? Find the podcast at safm.co.za.
Iziko Museums of South Africa has reached a monumental milestone. The bicentenary of the South African Museum, established in 1825, this iconic institution, housing more than 10 million artifacts and specimens, is a window to our planet's past, holding the keys to unearth the secrets of our histories. Step into the future, reimagine, explore, and join Iziko on an adventure as we mark 200 years.
You are listening to The Full Circle.
Alrighty, as we move along with the conversation this afternoon on The Full Circle, a little bit of a feel-good story now. South Africa's Ncazelo Mlilo has been nominated for the Women Changing the World Awards, the Grammys really for inspirational women, and Ncazelo is being recognized for her impact in mental health. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And thank you for having me.
It's only a pleasure. We appreciate the time that you've allowed us today. So first and foremost, congratulations for your nomination at the Women Changing the World Awards, which essentially is the feel-good, has been likened to the Grammys for the feel-goodness of inspirational women. Give us some background and some context around these awards.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I do feel good, and I've been doing this work for a number of years, and it's lovely to, get such recognition. So I developed a methodology called Tree of Life a couple of years ago, responding to children affected by HIV and AIDS. And it was essentially a methodology that is about helping children to tell their stories in ways that make them stronger and more hopeful about life. And so Tree of Life has gone international. It's in over 60 countries around the world, and it is used primarily in the UK. And I do think that the footprint of the success of Tree of Life is what has led to this nomination.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so I currently run an organization here in South Africa that I founded, which is called Paula. And we are doing a lot of amazing work in communities and providing culturally sensitive mental health interventions for the most disadvantaged and marginalized groups of our society. And so Paula too has received global recognition for the work that it does. Because I think, the fact that we emphasize on culturally sensitive, homegrown mental health solutions for African people, this is something that people kind of, appreciate about our work.
I mean, there's definitely some unique approaches to how you've done things, I think, Ncazelo, with your organizations, Paul, as well as Tree of Life. Let's talk a little bit about how you've sort of infuse cultural nuance and cultural sensitivity to really build organizations that speak to not only the needs of people on the ground, but also have become responsive in a way that it almost resonates. There's a resonance to those that it services.
Yeah, definitely, because I think if you would know this, that mental health is normally seen as something that's very foreign, it's not for Africans, and that's something that we are trying to, to look at changing. And a lot of that is caused by interventions that really shoot above people's heads, where people don't really understand what they're being invited to participate in. And so we've invested a lot of our time in collaborating and partnering with people affected by trauma and learning with them so that we can co-create methodologies that really speak to their experiences, but we also draw from their own knowledges and skills around how we could be helping them to be better and stronger. So I'm a narrative therapist, and that basically means that I'm trained in using stories in therapy. And so this, for me, fits extremely well because as African people, we are storytellers. And so a lot of our work is inviting people to come into group therapy interventions, and we share stories and we talk about our experiences in life in ways that are hopeful. A lot of Western-centric approaches tend to be very trauma-focused. But in the work that we do, we talk about how people are survivors, and we acknowledge that people have got strengths, they've got skills that can help them to navigate the different dilemmas that they experience in life. And so using storytelling approaches, using metaphors that people can relate to, and then finding ways to connect with people in ways that are relatable, in ways that speak to their culture or knowledges, and just appreciating who they are. For instance, the Tree of Life methodology is about using, the tree metaphor to invite people to tell stories about their lives. We talk about your roots, where do you come from, things about your culture that make you feel strong and grounded and make you feel proud about your identity. We recognize that people are not an island, and so a lot of the work that we do is about connecting people to community, to significant people in their lives, because solving problems needs to be communal. All problems are a product of culture and history. We cannot burden individuals with the responsibility of changing their lives, but it is about community. So a lot of our work really hinges on, the beautiful things about our Africanness that provide healing and hope to people. And so that's what my organization does. We use these methodologies with children in schools. We use them with women who've experienced and survived trauma. We use them with men and, families in crisis. And then we teach people all over the world how to work with these Afrocentric ideas.
Yeah.
A lot of my time is about training mental health practitioners all over the world how we use culturally sensitive ways for mental health, for healing. Yeah.
I mean, with over 20 years of experience in trauma counseling and specializing in narrative therapy, and you've just educated us on something new today, first time coming across narrative therapy, in all my years of radio, and it really sounds like an interesting approach, right? An interesting approach to how one renders psychosocial therapy, and I think even more pertinent is the fact that you've co-founded Tree of Life has gone on to be utilized in over 60 countries, including the US, Brazil, Australia, Canada, India, and Germany, to mention but a few. But it doesn't live in isolation, because you've also pioneered other methodologies that are aimed at GBV prevention.
Yes, as you asked that question, I'm thinking about the women who inspired the Courage methodology, women in Deep Flute who had gone through a lot of trauma. And as I was meeting and getting to know them, one of the things they say to me is that, Nazelo, as much as we have suffered as women through violence and abuse, that we are women of courage. We live our lives in courageous ways. And so this inspired what is now called the Courage methodology that is used with women who've survived trauma. And so it's through these women's stories that Courage was born. And so when we meet, we use the acronym Courage, to talk about women's experiences. We talk about the C of courage, celebrating survival. And that's where we start. We talk about how you've gone through so much, but you are a survivor. And let's talk about how to celebrate your survival. And the O of courage, your skills. What are our skills that we use to survive? Because our survival is not by chance. We have skills, we've got knowledge and drawing from all that. So this is just how I get inspiration from the people that I work with, who teach me so much about what it means to heal and what it means to be present in ways that are culturally resonant for people.
Yeah.
And so, so that is what, this work is about. It's getting inspiration and acknowledging that Africa is rich in knowledge and wisdom, and that we need not always look to the West for solutions. A lot of the solutions sit with us, within our own families, within our own communities, and then we can create, different ways of responding to hardships.
Absolutely.
Using what we have.
Absolutely. Very important work that you are pioneering there. And we celebrate you in this moment, recognizing over 25 years of experience in trauma counseling. That was Ncazelo Mlilo, globally renowned narrative therapist and psychosocial specialist. And of course, she is nominated at the Women Changing the World Awards in the categories People's Choice Award for Nonprofit and Social Enterprise and Women in Therapy and Counseling Services Awards. Very much so well deserved. It's approaching 2 o'clock, and Dineo is standing by with your news at the top of the hour, and then we'll come back on the other side and get into a conversation about doulas.
This Human Rights Month, SAFM is deepening a culture of social justice and human rights. It's a time to reflect, engage, and take action for a more just society. From thought-provoking discussions to powerful stories, SAFM is leading the conversations that move us. Because your voice matters, your rights matter, and together we shape a better future. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
Top stories: formal sector jobs increase by 12,000 and Israeli military extends evacuation orders in Gaza. A very good afternoon. With the news, I am Dineo Daung. Stats SA says the total number of formal sector jobs has increased by 12,000 in the last quarter of 2024. The increase brings the number of formally employed to 10.6 million. Trade contributed the highest number of jobs during the quarter, followed by business services and transport. However, community services, construction and manufacturing recorded a decline. There was an increase in both full-time and part-time employment on a quarterly basis. Stats says Matlapane Masupia says on a year-on-year, the formal sector jobs declined right across.
Results show a drop of 91,000. And if you zoom into industries causing that year-on-year drop, the first one is community services with 77,000, followed by manufacturing 19,000, mining 13,000, and lastly transport 5,000. Going back to community services with 77,000, this is due to government project of creating employment which came to an end due to budget constraint. The first one being PAYE Presidential Youth Initiative project, whereby assistant teachers were appointed to help in schools.
Government says it has approved about 23,000 business permits for spaza shops and other food handling businesses to operate. It says there were more than 87,400 applications received from July last year up until the February deadline this year. The Kwakta Department has briefed Parliament's Portfolio Committee on the status of the registrations. The department's director is Mbulelo Changana.
Out of that 87,407 applications, only 23,072 applications were approved. And that's important. We had 87,407 applications, 23,072 applications were approved. Now, out of the 23,000 applications approved, only 2,977 are foreign nationals. So you had 87,000 applications that were received, 23,072 approved, 2,977 are foreign nationals.
And in other news, Home Affairs Minister Dr. Leon Schreiber says state capture has opened the door to corruption in almost every sector within the country. He was speaking at the launch of the Border Management and Immigration Anti-Corruption Forum in Pretoria. The department, in collaboration with the Special Investigating Unit, launched this initiative, which aims to intensify efforts to combat corruption in the sector. Schreiber says sophisticated syndicates have organized themselves within the Home Affairs Department to extort and defraud both South Africans and immigrants.
Once the top echelons of the establishment were seen to endorse corruption at the very highest institutions of state, a message cascaded throughout society that extortion, fraud and theft has just become how we do things now in South Africa. The construction mafia and the construction industry that has been mentioned is one well-known example of how this pattern has spread to different sectors of society. But it is by no means the only such mafia or syndicate that has infiltrated and even merged with the system that it seeks to subvert.
Moving to KZN, the Department of Education in the province has been allocated 66.7 billion rand, an increase of 3.7 billion rand in the 2025-26 financial year. This is the largest allocation received by the three social sectors, the others being health and social development. Presenting the provincial budget, MEC for Finance Francois Rogers says the allocation includes funding for the 2025 wage agreement gap as well as the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative.
Education receives funds towards addressing budget pressures that have been evident since the commencement of the fiscal consolidation budget cuts. The funds for the employment initiative will be used to employ 10,322 educator assistants in the 25-26 year on a 12-month contract. The department's total budget has therefore increased by 3.7 billion rand year on year.
Lastly, further afield, the Israeli military has extended its evacuation orders in northern Gaza to include the Jabalia area. This as its ground forces continue to push into the territory after rockets were fired yesterday. The Israeli military resumed its campaign against Hamas in Gaza a week ago, shattering a 2-month ceasefire. According to Palestinian health officials, nearly 700 people, mostly women and children, have been killed since the IDF resumed its attacks. The BBC's Emir Nada reports.
As Israeli ground forces continue to push into the south, centre and north of the Gaza Strip, the military has issued a new evacuation order for the Jabalia area of northern Gaza, from where it says rockets were fired into Israel on Monday. Medical sources told the BBC that overnight there were deaths and injuries when an Israeli airstrike targeted the El Barej refugee camp in central Gaza. There was also a deadly attack in the El Zaytun neighbourhood southeast of Gaza City. The UN's humanitarian agency OCHA has issued a statement on the past 7 days saying, "Our calls for this madness to stop have gone unheeded. This bloody stain on our collective consciousness can only be undone if the world acts now."
Recapping the top story this hour, Stats SA says the total number of formal sector jobs has increased by 12,000 in the last quarter of 2024. The increase brings the number of formally employed to 10.6 million. For SAFM News, I'm Dino Mutaung. Headlines at 2:30.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m.
drifting away into the darkness. Ndizothatha umthwalo ndimbeke mqolo mama. Ubomi bunzima. Just lift my head up high. Open my eyes and I will fly. Oh, I'm barely coping, I'm feeling closing. Looking up, hoping the heavens will open. Mdali wesulu, dikhalela kuwe. Open up, I'm feeling closer now. The light is shining brighter, but I'm losing my flow. Kudala, isiwa ndivuka. Ndifuna noluthando, ndifuna noluthando. Kudala, ndifuna ubomi buvume vungama ngonya. Vungama, vuleka, vuleka. Vuleka, vuleka, vuleka masulu. Vuleka masulu. Vuleka masulu. Oh, vuleka, vuleka, vuleka. Vuleka masulu. Vuleka masulu. Vuleka masulu. I'm giving, they taking, tripping, I'm falling. Tell me I'm nothing, don't care what they're saying. I'm begging you, darling, stop losing your flow. No more drifting, no more drifting away. Livumile kamaku, afulekile masulu. I'm fighting for survival. Dilikawe, dilikawe, dingonyama. Vuleka, vuleka. Vuleka, vuleka, vuleka masulu. Vuleka masulu. Vuleka masulu. Oh, vuleka, vuleka, vuleka. Vuleka masulu. Vuleka masulu. Vuleka masulu.
Amanda Black coming through with Amazulu, and I think that goes down probably as her most seminal single thus far. I mean, she's still got a very long career ahead of her and going to produce many projects that are going to go under the seminal folder of the work that she leaves behind one day. That is how we kick off 2 o'clock. It's just gone 10 past 2 on the Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga, right here on SAFM, leading the conversation. It is Tuesday after 2 o'clock, so we discuss all things health and wellness, and World Doula Week is upon us. It kicked off on the 22nd of March and it's running until the 28th. And while maternal deaths in South Africa have been declining, they remain higher than the global target. And of course, we know that simultaneously our country is facing high unemployment rates. And some suggest that perhaps we could address both these issues by training and accrediting and professionalizing birth workers known as doulas. Joining us now, we've got Kifilwe Sibenya, who's the director of Doulas of South Africa and Embrace Mamandla Fellow. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Bridget. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for the time and the conversation. Much appreciated. Before we even get into World Doula Week, but perhaps for folks who don't understand what is a doula, let's get into defining what is a doula and the kind of significance and service that a doula plays in the maternal health care work.
Okay, no, great stuff. Doulas are trained non-clinical support staff, so they play the non-clinical role in a woman's birth. They provide women and their families with continuous support during their pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. Globally, our support has been proven to improve birth outcomes, and it is recognized by the World Health Organization. And currently, on the updated National Maternal and Perinatal Care Guidelines, it recognizes the importance of birth companions in South Africa. So our role is basically to support women emotionally and physically and provide them with adequate evidence-based knowledge. And we also advocate for women that are giving birth, especially in spaces where they are unseen and unheard.
Well, a very important work, I think, that doulas partake in, but perhaps often misunderstood as well, right? Especially when being juxtaposed with Western traditional services.
Yeah, that's correct, Bridget. I mean, the role of doulas, the work that we do, is an ancient practice. No matter where you find it in the world, it is indigenous work. And it is work that needs to be recognized. We do have, it was firstly recognized as traditional birth attendants, and there has the existence of birth workers has been there for generations. And despite the contributions and the effectiveness that they have, in their communities, and doulas are underutilized in the healthcare system. And in fact, we will talk about the historical background of doula work and birth work. And, every one of us, with every birth being told, every birth story being told, there was a companion, It does not matter if it was from a traditional background or from a biomedical background. However, there have been women that have been identified to have done this work for generations. So, the work is ancient, it's indigenous, and the origin of it is, it goes way back. We cannot talk about the existence of humans without recognizing that women could not birth alone.
Yeah. Why, given all of that sort of context, the historical and cultural context of doulas, especially for us Africans, as you say, they've always been, in villages as far back as however many generations, the elderly women that had the knowledge, had the experience, that would be there, would be present to share the emotional, the physical, and support mothers through the journey. Given all of that context and the background, why is South Africa still slow in progress in recognizing and integrating doulas?
I think we currently South Africa, the biomedical way of care in maternity outweighs the traditional background and the traditional history, and my advocacy goes towards saying a woman has got a birthright. It is their right to have a birth companion. And also, I speak boldly about language inclusivity. I talk about recognizing culture and religious backgrounds. And however, this has since been, it still is a concern in South Africa because of doulas. Currently, we are trained and certified to operate under a biomedical system. And the challenge then comes that you find that, especially women of color, we do have women of color that are currently practicing without the certification, and however, their work is not recognized, and we are so far behind in recognizing indigenous workers in the biomedical setting.
Which is interesting, right? Because I'd love to know where the world stands on this. From what I understand, there's been some sort of recent years a move towards integrating doulas and other sort of maternal and prenatal care systems and guidelines. Is the world moving to integrate more indigenous knowledges and systems into it?
There's currently a movement. The world is moving towards that. More women are opting to have a more culturally competent care.
Mm.
You know, there is an emphasis on culturally competent care, where women would like to be served and supported by birth workers that they can identify with. So we are moving towards the right direction, and that is why it's very important to use opportunities like this to open these conversations, to make women and communities aware that we do have the existence of birth workers in South Africa. And I mean, the world is currently looking at us, you know, because there is an emphasis on reaching out to South African doulas in order for us to be training the global community about black doula care, or women of, you know, about indigenous doula training, or we can call it indigenous doula training, we can call it traditional training, whichever way we'd like to put it. There is a movement coming from the West, moving towards Africa, and actually celebrating the existence and the work and the rich, you know, the beautiful, rich childbirth traditions that we hold. So there is a move, and we are moving towards the right direction.
Let's take a quick pause here, Kifilwe. It's just gone 2:20 on the Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga on SAFM. We're going to take a quick pause, and then we come back and we continue our conversation looking at World Doula Week.
The Portfolio Committee on Premier and Finance will embark on public hearings throughout the province on the Northwest Appropriation Bill 2025 on the 26th March 2025 in Ngakamudiri Molema District at Delareyville Municipal Hall in Delarey, in Dr. Kenneth Kaunda District at Tihani Community Hall in Tihani, in Dr. Ruth Sohomutsi Mumbadi District at Bonabona Community Hall in Bonabona, in Bojanala District, Breas White Hall in Breads. All hearings start at 10.
This Human Rights Month, SAFM is deepening a culture of social justice and human rights. It's a time to reflect, engage, and take action for a more just society. From thought-provoking discussions to powerful stories, SAFM is leading the conversations that move us. Because your voice matters, your rights matter, and together we shape a better future. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. Listening to the Full Circle.
It is the Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga on SAFM, having the conversations that lead the nation. And today we're having one on the back of World Doula Week, which commenced on the 22nd and it's wrapping up on the 28th of March. And really just bringing a focus to the very important work that birthing partners do in supporting women and families as they transition through their journey into motherhood, and trying to have a quick conversation, but that covers a whole host of themes that speaks to doulas, the importance of and the challenges that they face as well. Our lines are open, by the way, if you'd like to WhatsApp us and to share your perspective on this conversation on 061-410-4107 is our WhatsApp line. Have you used the doula, by the way? I'd love to actually know if someone has ever used a doula or a midwife, and how was that experience for you, and would it be something that you would recommend to someone else? Let's talk about, professionalizing doulas, Kifilwe. How does that also plug into the conversation that we keep having around our unemployment crises, but also more so around our shortage of skilled human resource within the healthcare sector?
Bridget, as you all know, South Africa does have a high female unemployment rate. And professionalizing doula trade has the potential to create sustainable jobs in the care economy. The role of the doula, the main role of the doula is to operate also in the communities. It's very community-based, Hence, we encourage and we are advocating for community-based doula programs. And I really do believe that by professionalizing the service does not only, protect us as doulas, but also for our clients and for mothers, because accreditation and regulation is needed to standardize the training, and this will ensure the quality of care.
And ensuring quality of care, I think, being at the center of all these conversations, right? Because you get people on both sides, those who advocate for doulas and midwives and what they might call quote-unquote alternative forms of treatment. And I literally did use air quotes if you are watching us on streaming. And those in the West saying, but how do we ensure that everyone who works in this very fragile, fragile part of medicine, like maternity and childbirth, how do we make sure that they are well trained and well equipped for every situation, without obviously shunning on the knowledge and the experience of doulas, but also understanding that there's a lot that needs to be considered from a medical perspective, right? So would this accreditation and coming together of the various stakeholders help to answer and ease some of those questions and anxieties, the working together with the departments of health and the various medical stakeholders and doulas, just to ensure that when we send doulas out there in the world, we are sending them well equipped?
Yes. Look, as doulas of South Africa, we are ready to engage with policymakers, to establish a sustainable policy-driven framework. We are ready. We are ready to lead, and we are ready to be part of the conversation that highlights the importance of decolonizing doula training in South Africa, having access to doula training in South Africa, recognizing prior learning experience, in the birthing space, in South Africa, because of then that amplifies the voices of the existing indigenous birth workers that are based in the villages, that are based in, in the communities that do not have access to doula training in South Africa. So, we cannot shy away from the reality that, we are trained and we are trained to believe that we are non-clinical support staff, right? And also, our role is also seen as a luxury rather than a necessity, And I mean, it is proven that women who have had doulas do have a satisfying birth experience, that show, And however, I think because of the high, because of the role that we play in the maternal space, I think it's still undefined, And I think this is an opportunity for government to actually sit down birth companions, and to actually understand the critical role that we play, And also, like I said before, the updated National Maternal and Perinatal Care Guideline, it does recognize the importance of birth companions in South Africa. Then the question would be, how do we train and how do we professionalize doulas in South Africa, especially because we need to have a training that ensures a true reflection of our diversity as a nation.
Absolutely.
By offering the various doula training.
Are there... pardon me, are there lessons that can be taken from global case studies, for instance? I think I read somewhere that in the U.S., in certain states like Minnesota and New Jersey, I think, they've incorporated doulas into Medicaid, for instance. And this is done a lot by way of lowering the healthcare costs.
Yes. Yes, currently in South Africa, we do have trained and certified doulas. Do have access to medical aids. So we currently have 3 medical aids in South Africa. However, my stance is those medical aids do not reflect the working class or the marginalized. It's not a true reflection of the type and the different medical aids we have in our country. So not all medical aids have a doula benefit, So hence I'm saying we do have the top 3 that still does look like a luxury, you know, the association with those three still for me does not reflect. It's not a true reflection of the type or of the diverse cultures or it's not a true reflection of our nationality or as a country, as people that have got access to medical aid. I'm sure currently we did reach out to certain medical aid and they still do not know. I think the issue here is that the role of the doula is not defined yet in South Africa, currently in South Africa.
Very interesting. I was going to throw in a sassy comment there and say, well, I guess some of the top medical aides still dispute whether or not a surgeon requires a surgical assistance. And you see it when you make the claims and then they decline paying for your surgical assistant and you go, oh, okay. So I guess, something like a doula, as much as they may in the corridors recognize the importance of the work that is done, they just won't recognize it on paper.
Well, they don't recognize it on paper, and there are terms and conditions. Like certification, it's important, and that is why, as Doulas of South Africa, we are not a training organization. We are a membership-paying fee organization. So we are here to encourage, and we are committed to uplifting doula work in South Africa. So we accept the different. We accept doulas from different training organizations, right? And our association then grants doulas access to practice independently and also be able to claim from these medical aids that we talk about.
And just as we wrap it up, 30 seconds or less, and I would think fundamental to the organization as well is ensuring the checks and balances and the accreditations are all adhered to by all your doula members.
Yes.
Lovely stuff. Kifilo Sibenya, thank you so much for the time. Director of DOSA, the Doulas of South Africa, and an Embrace Mamandla Fellow. 2:30 on the dot. Dineo Mutawung is standing by with the headline news, and then we come back with a little bit of Kids Corner before we wrap up the show.
Thanks, Bridget. Let's take a look at the headlines at 2:30. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the cutting of U.S. aid to South Africa has been a wake-up call. In other news, Stats SA says the total number of formal sector jobs has increased by 12,000 in the last quarter of 2024. And the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs says foreign nationals will be the most affected by the implementation of the regulations of spaza shops and other food handling businesses. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
You are listening to The Full Circle. This program is brought to you by SABC Education. Enriching minds, enriching lives.
My name and surname is Piri Shempende. I have 11 friends and it is sad to say that I am not learning anything from my friends. I say this because where they are, there is always drama and fights, and they are always getting into trouble for going into places they are not supposed to. Out of 11 friends, I have one good one who is kind and supportive. It is also good to learn from others. I teach my friends kindness, good morals and values. I am also teaching them to listen to each other when they talk. I just know they can do better if they try. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Zonaka Malihasi. I am 10 years old. I live at Midland Zone 7. I'm here to talk about learning from one another, friends and peers. Yes, there's something good and useful that I've learned from my friends that is still helping me even now. Yes, I think it is great to learn to each other as friends or peers. I think my friends or peers have learned something from me. I've taught my friends or peers that every Sunday we must go to the Sunday school. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Ashley Kabamba. I think one thing I could say I've learned from a friend
that was good and useful, which is still helping me today, is actually accepting that it is okay for you to ask help sometimes. It does not make you annoying or helpless. I do really think that it is great for people to learn from their friends or peers. I really do think that I have at least taught one of my friends or peers a little something that they could also find useful, like patience. I believe I used to take time doing things which would make my friends to actually get used to waiting for me. Nowadays, they just wait for me without even complaining.
Hello, my name is Bikhansa Taka. Yes, there is something good and useful that I have learned from my friends that is still helping me even now. Yes, I think it is very great to learn from each other as friends or peers. Yes, I do think my friends have learned something from me. I have taught my friends how to work out sums in maths.
Hello everyone, I'm Lorraine Moyo. Yes, there are things I learned from my brother. He's always so neat. I now learn to be neat. No, my siblings don't learn from me. I think that I still have a lot to learn myself and can't teach anyone anything yet. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Mushfiqa Talib. Even though my siblings are younger than me, I still learn a lot from them, and they also learn a lot from me. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Hello everybody, my name is Tulufelemon, and there are also a couple of things that my siblings and I learn from each other, such as how to be more kind, how to be more friendly, and also outgoing.
Hello friends and happy Tuesday. Today let's talk about learning from our friends and peers. How many friends do you have? Some people have many friends and some have just a few close ones. No matter how many friends you have, friendship is special because we learn from each other. Have you ever learned something useful from a friend? Maybe a friend taught you how to tie your shoes, ride a bike, or solve a tricky math problem. Sometimes friends teach us important life lessons like sharing, kindness, or even being more confident. Do you think it's a good idea to learn from your friends and peers? Yes! We can learn good habits, new skills, and even different ways to solve problems by paying attention to what our friends do. But remember, it's important to learn good things from friends and not bad habits. Always choose to learn things that make you better, smarter, and kinder. Now think about this. What are you teaching your friends? Are you showing them kindness, helping them with schoolwork, teaching them a fun game? Friendship is all about learning from each other and growing together. Right now, some of you are already on a school break, while others will be going on break at the end of the week. This is a great time to learn something new from your friends. Maybe you can try learning a new skill like drawing or painting, reading a new book or sharing what you learned, practicing a sport or a new game together, learning a new song or dance moves. School breaks are not just for resting. They are also a great time to discover new things, try new activities, and spend time learning from your friends and family. So friends, be open to learning good and useful things from the people around you. And don't forget to share your own knowledge with others too. That's all for today, friends. Enjoy your break, learn something new, and we'll chat again soon. Bye for now.
This program was brought to you by SABC Education. Enriching minds, enriching lives.
Something big is coming. 6:30 will never be the same. Amalanga Wafani, only on SABC 1. The Cheetahs are very hungry for victory. However, Bafana say they are in the business of collecting 3 points. The West battles it out with the South. This is the FIFA World Cup 2026 African qualifier. Experience the delight of African football. Benin versus South Africa. On Tuesday, 25 March at 5:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, S3, and at 6 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Also, available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
You are listening to The Full Circle.
Alrighty, as we prepare to wind down the show, we're catching up now with Dr. Tara Tyagarajan, who is a founder and chief scientist at Sapien Labs. And we're having a conversation around young adults in sub-Saharan Africa who have the highest mental well-being scores globally in a new report that shows that mental health in their Western counterparts is actually severely declining. How are you doing this afternoon, Dr. Tara? Dr. Tara?
Yes.
How are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you so much for the time. Firstly, let's get some context around Sapien Labs. From what I understand, a global leader in the mental health research fraternity.
Yes, that's correct. The Global Mind Project is now the largest survey of mind health and well-being across the world, with data now from over 2 million people.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a significant sample. And let's talk about the Mental State of the World 2024 report.
Yes. So in 2024, one of the things that we're showing really is that there's not much of a recovery from COVID, but really the biggest trend that we focus on is the very significant decline in what we're calling mind health and well-being in each younger generation. Mm-hmm. And I want to qualify what mind health and well-being is. I think a lot of people, when they hear the word well-being, they think immediately of happiness. Mm-hmm. And if you hear the term mental health, you think of depression or anxiety. But what is measured here in this assessment that we use in this survey is really a 360 view of all the mental capacities, emotional, social, cognitive, and even the sort of mind-body connection, the physical aspects. And so it's really a measure of, many facets of all the capacities that help you to navigate life, all the challenges of life and to function productively. Mm. So the main thing that is declining with younger generations is the aspects of emotional control and regulation, and also the ability to form relationships and maintain positive relationships with other people. So this really is the fundamental aspect of what we see is diminishing generation by generation across the globe.
Mm. And talk to us a little bit about, what those findings help us better understand, or what they reveal. For instance, when you talk about the decline in each generation's ability to form those relationships, does that also speak to just where we are from a social construct perspective, and the fact that we live in such a digitized world that creates isolation with the falsehood of connection?
Absolutely. I think there are a number of different factors to this. The social aspect, certainly, a lot of it has to do with the digital environment and the fact that people are becoming more isolated by it. I think there's also factors around cultural factors that are influenced obviously by the digital environment, but cultural factors of individualism where you see that move away from family. And we see one of the biggest, one of major predictors and causes of this is a progressive decline in family bonds. And, every younger generation, fewer have close families. A much larger proportion are estranged from families. And so the breakdown of some of these fundamental societal structures is certainly one of the big factors behind it.
Mm. When you talk about the decline in familial bonds, it struck a nerve with me, because I think it's one of the things that one notices when you sort of live the lives that we do, where your mother's generation, or even your grandparents, were born of a particular region, then migrated to another region. your parents and their siblings might live in completely different provinces, hundreds of kilometers apart. So you're growing up away and separated from your extended family, and you almost, the nucleus becomes all that you have by way of family that is close by. And so the cycle continues, because then you have children who ultimately become separated from their children, from their cousins and the extended family, and so it goes on, speaking to that decline in family bonds.
Absolutely. And I think, like everything in life, there's only so much time and so much energy, and anything that you want to preserve, you have to cultivate actively. And, when you take the attention away from one, when you put attention into one thing, you take it away from another.
Absolutely. Let's also, whilst we're talking about some of the decline trends, right? Let's part of the findings here was the decline across, the reveal was that young African adults are actually showing a stronger mental resilience compared to their peers in higher income nations, which I found very interesting. And what does that talk to?
I think there are a few reasons behind that. I think one of the factors is that in the digital environment, I think that in most African countries, the young adults have got a smartphone later in life compared to their Western counterparts. So whereas the age at which a child would be given a smartphone in the United States or the UK is on average between 10 and 11 years old, in many African nations it's 16, 17. And so that makes a very, very big difference. One of the things we're seeing is that the younger age you get a smartphone in childhood, the more likely you are to have problems with relationships, suicidal thoughts, aggression towards others as a young adult. And so, the exposing children to a certain environment, or also displacing time spent in person, because those who get a phone, what we see in the statistics is that they tend to spend between 5 to 8 hours a day online, which takes away all of the time that you might have spent, playing with other kids or even interacting with adults, and basically learning all the social skills of how to read body language, facial expression, tone of voice, all of the factors that are required for making more, stable relationships with others. So I think that's a big factor. There are other factors as well. I think what we see is the food environment is a very big factor in this decline, and many African countries don't have as much of the ultra-processed food consumption as the West, where it's become the sort of center of the diet in Western countries, with a lot of new food additives and ingredients that are, many of them are neurotoxic. And so that's another factor. And of course, environmental aspects. So for instance, Tanzania is doing very well, even relative to other African countries, where youth, the decline is there in every country, but relative to other countries. And you could see other factors as well that we see, the plastics. We're seeing now plastics are now, people are finding that it's now more concentrated in the brain than other organs in the body, because we breathe it, we drink it, we eat it in all our containers. And, for example, Tanzania has banned single-use plastic. So how much that contributes, I don't know exactly, but, these are some of the factors that could be driving this.
Very interesting. And I think perhaps the disheartening part of such research is that one would then want to know whether or not we see, or we are preempting an improvement in the near future. But part of the research here speaks to the fact that there seems to be no signs of recovery, at least in that 18 to 34 cohort in Western nations.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think where we saw the biggest decline with COVID was in the younger age groups. Those above 55 did not really change much during COVID, whereas the younger age groups changed a lot. And that has not shifted since then. And, maybe, obviously, we don't know exactly why that's the case. But one of the hypotheses that we have is that, if a big part of the the challenge is because of environmental toxins and chemicals in the food that destabilize the nervous system. Then when you're faced with a challenge in life, that if the nervous system a little bit more destabilized, it's going to have a bigger impact. So for example, if you have a car that's very well made and very robust, if it hits a rock and it'll keep going, whereas if it's things are a little bit shaky in the car, then maybe the door will fall off, or something will happen. and so I think that's the sort of challenge I think that we have, is that maybe when there was vulnerability in the system, that when you were hit with all of the challenges of COVID, that the impact was greater.
So bringing it a little bit closer to home, Dr. Tara, South Africa, alarmingly so, the only country surveyed in Africa that aligned more to the Western declines.
Yes, and I think what we see is it seems to go hand in hand with the economic growth, and obviously South Africa is one of the more economically stronger countries, and a lot of the which means that internet, smartphones, ultra processed food, environmental toxins, those all go hand in hand with economy, basically.
Yeah.
And the question really is, how do we grow in a manner that is not creating an environment that is actually physiologically toxic to the human being and the human brain? And I think that's the challenge we have ahead of us, is to understand how to strike that balance and to be able to protect the human being in the process of growth.
I mean, you bring up Tanzania. I know that Nigeria and Kenya, that also formed part of the study, the younger adults in those two regions scored relatively well with the mental health quotient. What should we be, because you also advised that Africa holds a unique advantage when it comes to youth mental health. How do we better foster and nurture that to ensure a better mental health and well-being for young Africans?
Well, I think, it obviously has to be fostered at various different levels. I think at the level of government, really, how do you bring this into the framework of decision making on economic initiatives, right? How do you look at an economic initiative from the perspective of, one, what it does for growth, but also what it might do to the human mind, the human brain, and human beings. So for example, a very simple example would be when you're importing products from the West, how are they evaluated in terms of what they're putting out there? Even if it's household products, are they releasing chemical toxins that are damaging to the brain? Does the food have excessive additives that might be harmful? So I think partly thinking about what products are imported, and having some kinds of checks and controls around that is important. I think there's in various different dimensions. I think just considering the impact to mind health is important. Absolutely. I think from the perspective of schools have a very important role to play, because children spend most of their time there. So, what is the technology policy of schools? Are they fostering friendships and a sense of community? What is the food environment of the schools? There are a number of, the schools can think more actively about these things. And of course, as individuals,
Dr. Tara, I just want us to pause there for a second. I don't want the commercial to cut you off rudely. Let's take a quick commercial pause, and then we'll come back and continue our conversation.
Something big is coming. 6:30 will never be the same. Amalanga Wafani, only on SABC 1.
Iziko Museums of South Africa has reached a monumental milestone with the bicentenary of the South African Museum. Established back in 1825, this iconic institution, housing more than 10 million artifacts and specimens, is a window to our planet's past, holding the keys to unearth the secrets of our histories. Step into the future, reimagine, explore, and join Iziko on an adventure as we mark 200 years.
Whether we are at the workplace, within communities, at school, or with our friends and family, we all need to demonstrate the kind of responsibility that we would like to see in our country's future. SAFM commemorates Human Rights Month.
The South African Council for Education denounces violence against teachers and violations of their dignity and humanity. It therefore calls upon the public, parents and learners to protect and respect teachers' rights because their rights are human rights too. Let us show them appreciation, respect and the support that they deserve.
Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
We are in conversation with Dr. Tara Jarajan. My apologies, Dr. Tara, founder and chief scientist at Sapien Labs, and she's walking us through the reports for the Mental State of the World 2024 report. And as we were going into a break, we were just talking about, how do we foster better mental well-being? And you were just going into a thought around the importance of schools, right? I read that live read around the South African Council for Education denouncing violence against teachers and violations of their dignity and humanity. And we're starting to see this as an indicator of the mental strain that some of our South African youngsters are having to deal with and having to bring onto school campuses, given the social, political, environments and dimensions that they deal with that can be uniquely South African. But I think it somewhat also speaks to what you were saying around perhaps schooling environments and the role that they play also in nurturing good mental well-being and good mental health.
Absolutely. And I think, it's not what we call, I would say, I'm just using the term mind health simply to expand as a more expanded term beyond the mood and aspects that people typically associate with mental health. But, this overall aspect of mind health, of being able to have control and regulation over your thoughts and emotions, of being able to relate to other people, all of these all contribute to ultimately, success in school as well, from grades to behavior in school and all of the factors that schools are trying to foster. So it's not something independent from what schools really, the goals are for schools. And I think it's just that we have to be aware of how different aspects of the environment really impact, the mind of a child and the brain of a child and what that ultimately would mean for their, for their well-being and future. So I think, if we understand these factors, and I think there's obviously so many different aspects that every school needs to try and evaluate, and, we help organizations evaluate whether the policies they're making are moving the needle and, understanding what aspects within the organization might be driving some of the challenges. So I think, schools, that it takes, this is an enormous global problem, and I think if we don't all work on, experimenting and finding those ways of moving the needle, that we're looking at a much bleaker future. So I think schools have a role to play, and I think being mindful and conscious of these aspects can help with strategy.
Yeah. For Africa, for Africa, South Africa in particular, what would be your desired takeaway for policymakers, stakeholders, as well as players that must come together to have this conversation at a broader level?
Absolutely. I mean, I think because it spans so many different dimensions of life, right? It would from education to health to things like food safety to environmental protection. So many different aspects have to play into this, because it's not a single factor, or technology policies, social media policies. There's so many different aspects. So I think, it's, if this issue can be brought front and center, I think it requires, to start with, people realizing the challenge and bringing it into the discussions and how do we then enable different government agencies and divisions to incorporate that into their thinking.
Absolutely. Dr. Tara, we appreciate the time with you today. That was Dr. Tara Thiagarajan, who is Thiagarajan, there we go, founder and chief scientist at Spartian Labs, and of course walking us through some of that report that looks into young adults in sub-Saharan Africa who had the highest mental well-being scores globally in this report versus their Western counterparts. And of course, the regions that stuck out there were Tanzania, Nigeria, and Kenya, who scored relatively high, while some of the advancement in South Africa has landed us on the back footing of that wellness scoring. That is how we wrap up the show today. We thank you so much for choosing to be in conversation with us. Ashraf is standing by with the team, and they're going to be taking over from 3 o'clock. Coming through with I'm wondering what's happening behind me. There's a lot happening behind me. Even I'm being distracted. Zai just walked in the building. Anyway, Ashraf and his team are coming up from 3 o'clock on the National Pulse. I will see you guys tomorrow. Inshallah, God willing, we get to do it again.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
Would you then say that Ibrahim Rasool overextended himself in terms of his role as an ambassador by making the comments he made?
From the U.S. perspective, he certainly would have gone beyond, because remember, his role here is as an ambassador who is supposed to be maintaining open communication channels. He's supposed to be conducting things that are aligned with diplomatic norms and so on. And the question then becomes, is that how he was sent here by the President Ramaphosa? Because he's representing Ramaphosa. He's representing South Africa.
Pearl Matibe is Washington, D.C. based geopolitical analyst and correspondent.
You're listening to the National Pulse. Missed it? Find the podcast at safm.co.za.
Top stories: Ramaphosa highlights U.S. aid cut challenges, and Monitor accuses Sudan army of major strike on Darfur market. With the news, I'm Dino Madaung. Good afternoon. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the cutting of U.S. aid to South Africa has been a wake-up call. The president was speaking at the first day of Nursing Union Denosa's 9th National Congress at Birchwood on Gauteng's East Rand. A key discussion of the meeting is the aftermath of the cutting of HIV and AIDS funding by the U.S. Speaking on the sidelines of the Congress, Ramaphosa highlighted the need for South Africa to become more reliant.
In many ways, it's a wake-up call on our part as South Africans that we've got to find ways of being self-reliant, of relying on our own resources, and that is what our people expect, even within our fiscal constraints and challenges. So this is a matter that we are discussing, and our sovereignty is important, and our sovereignty as a country should also mean that we must find ways all the time to look after the welfare of South Africans.
Stats SA says the total number of formal sector jobs has increased by 12,000 in the last quarter of 2024. The increase brings the number of formally employed to 10.6 million. Trade contributed the highest number of jobs during the quarter, followed by business services and transport. There was an increase in both full-time and part-time employment on a quarterly basis. Stats SA's Matlapane Masupia says on a year-on-year the formal sector jobs declined.
results show a drop of 91,000. And if you zoom into industries causing that year-on-year drop, the first one is community services with 77,000, followed by manufacturing 19,000, mining 13,000, and lastly transport 5,000. Going back to community services with 77,000, this is due to government project of creating employment which came to